welcome back to the DF Retro Super Show. I'm John Lindemann. This is episode 7. Today, we're talking about Unreal Engine 3 and its legacy. And to do that, I brought along two of my very favorite co-hosts in the whole world. First of all, once again, the man himself, Coury Carlson.
The man himself, the editor of the show, not putting enough gameplay footage in there, I guess, for some viewers. Doing what I can.
We're happy to have you here. And of course, alongside Coury, we also have the master of the Virtual Boy, Marc Triforce Duddleson.
This will be old news by the time it came out, but it was just announced today that some unreleased Virtual Boy games are coming to the Nintendo Switch Online, which is kind of nuts. I don't think anyone saw that coming.
I love it. That's just awesome stuff. I love the Virtual Boy. I can't wait to check this out. But yes, gentlemen, today we're talking Unreal Engine 3 because after the 2006 episode, it kind of stuck out. And Coury, you suggested, hey, we should talk about this specific engine and its legacy. There's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad, and there's just a lot to talk about in general. But before we dive into the topic today, let's go ahead and talk about what we've been doing lately in the world of retro. So yes, we're here in the midst of winter storms everywhere, both in Europe and in the US. So with that, you spend a lot of time indoors playing some video games. What have you guys been playing in the world of retro?
Oh, I've got a pretty special one today, I think. Last night, for the Backloggery streams, we started playing Resident Evil Outbreak online using fan servers. Are you aware of this at all, John?
No, I was not aware of this at all. Explain more.
So this is cool. It's called, I think it's called Outbreak Server Resurrection or something like that. It's like OBSVR or SRV, I think is Observe, OBSRV.org. They'd run a private server, like a reverse engineered Resident Evil Outbreak private server, and you can play it on original hardware. You can play it on emulation. And actually what's kind of cool about it, that just kind of shows all the technology coming together and make this possible and how crazy it is. We did 4-player multiplayer, and one of us, me, was on original hardware. Mm-hmm. One of us was on Windows, Linux,
no way,
and Mac. It's like just completely coincidence, but all of these systems were working together flawlessly, which was kind of cool. And it's really not that hard to set up. You do need a Japanese version of the game. That's just how the server is designed to work.
I mean, obviously it's a Resident Evil game, so it had English dialogue.
Yes, but there is a patch that mostly restores most English text to the game. But it's designed around Biohazard Outbreak rather than Resident Evil Outbreak for whatever reason. I don't know. But if I'm not mistaken, I think if you just had like a Japanese disc, you could just do this straight off the disc if you wanted. But I am using the patch that restores most English. There's still some Japanese text in it, but it's extremely playable for English. All you have to do basically is set up a custom DNS, which puts you onto their server, and instead of using like your Capcom login, you use a forum username and password that you create for the Observe forums. And you could just log in, use their servers. You can see a lot of activity in the different rooms, people creating rooms in there all the time. And it's really cool. It's like playing classic, classic style, like predetermined camera angles, Resident Evil. It's more like Code Veronica, where it's like in 3D space, so the camera moves a bit, but the camera turns at predetermined points. So it's classic Resident Evil gameplay with your friends. One of us, not me, was already pretty familiar with the game. Not to the point where it was like completely no challenge in figuring things out. But it was good to have some guidance, some familiarity, because the game, especially the first level, like really drops you into this chaotic situation where these zombies are, coming into the bar. And but yeah,
they're thirsty. They just want to drink.
Yeah, well, but once you kind of get a feel for the game, you're going to fail a bit at first. It's a little chaotic at first, but it becomes really fun. Like the second level, you actually go through this vent and you end up getting split up and put into different locations. You go through the vent. So like you might find something in your area where you're like, I don't know what to do with this. And then someone's like, oh, like there's like a card reader for that on my floor, so it's kind of cool. I think the way the game was originally designed where you would be playing with just kind of these pre-selected, like, you hit the analog stick to say thanks, or I need this or something. That would be pretty difficult, I think, but with voice chat and other modern means of communication, I'd say it's much more playable. It's a fun experience, and the reason that we're doing it is because people may know that Grace Ashcroft, one of the protagonists of Resident Evil 9, is the daughter of Alyssa Ashcroft, who was one of the people involved in the Raccoon City incident, which is what the two Outbreak games are about. So we kind of wanted to squeeze in the weeks leading up to Resident Evil 9's launch. We wanted to see Alyssa Ashcroft's story. So it's pretty neat. I mean, it's in a lot of ways, it's probably more playable today with a group of friends than it was even back then, right? Because it's a pretty obtuse game. Like you kind of need some understanding of it before getting into it. But once it clicks, it's a good fun time.
Sounds good, man. We might have to try this when you're visiting, actually. It sounds like a good time.
Yeah,
I actually have the game, but I've never been able to play it in multiplayer.
Yeah, playing it by yourself is not a great experience. It's the AI characters, like they're just like crawling on the ground, dying, going, help me. And you're like, I literally do not know how to help you.
Oh boy.
So it is much better with friends. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
So that's a good shout out. What about you, Coury?
I haven't been playing a whole lot lately, but I did on our My Life in Gaming live stream on Sunday. I played through the game Full Void, which is a cinematic platformer, much in the vein of like Flashback or Out of This World or Another World. Except for, this is, I think it came out in 2020 or 2021. The only physical copy that you can get of this game apparently is on the Evercade. So I played it on the Evercade. And it's a quick, breezy 3-hour experience. No weapons involved in this game. It's just a puzzle platformer with some great animation, the occasional 3D assets in the background or interactive that you can interact with, and it's just like a really cool story. I don't think there's any dialogue or text or anything in it. It's just a really nice. If you like a cinematic platformer, I highly recommend it.
Right, it kind of shows like flashbacks and stuff, doesn't it? You're like going along, and then you'll see like a glimpse of what this place used to be.
Right,
and then it snaps back to the game. That's cool. I mean, in a game that's sort of like an homage to the game Flashback, it does make sense to have flashbacks in it, I would say.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I would say it's closer probably to Another World than it is to Flashback.
Right. So you don't have weapons, right?
Right. There was a game that came out called Lunark it's closer to Flashback.
That's what I was thinking of, right?
But another thing that I didn't play on stream, but I told Try that he should check out, and then he like immediately fell in love with it, is the game Edward Randy, the Cliffhanger.
Oh, yeah. The Cliffhanger.
Yeah. Just a cool.
I love that game.
It's just a cool like Indiana Jones set piece game, I guess. Every single level is a different Indiana Jones style set piece, whether you're like on a speeding boat or there's like where you're on a biplane or something like that.
Yeah. And then you're like driving a car. Like what's funny about that is like Evercade sent me and Coury some things to look at recently, and like that is included with a whole bunch of like a ton of other Data East games. on this handheld, but like as we're like, you're playing Full Void on stream, I'm testing out some of the games on here. Like they sent us this stuff, but we're like immediately like, I want to own like a cartridge of Edward Randy. So we like then both went and like actually bought the Data East cartridge. I think it's Data East Arcade 2 that has it. So like I mean, even though they sent us some stuff, like we love what Evercade is doing. So we like to, we like to buy
really
some of those
cool.
sometimes.
It's really come into its own, hasn't it?
Oh yeah. There's a lot of cool like cartridges like being planned, and now that they're doing the more high capacity cartridges, you know, there's a Tomb Raider trilogy that came out, so they're doing like PlayStation emulation and stuff on there. I love what Evercade is doing, or Blaze Entertainment is doing with the Evercade.
Yep, I agree.
And Try was very surprised to find out that, you know, these cartridges save on the cart.
Right. Yeah, I didn't know that, because I had a copy of Full Void as well, and I tested it out on the Evercade VS. And then during the stream, I was like, oh, I wonder what it looks like, because it's a widescreen game. I wonder what it looks like on this, you know, the Super Pocket handheld. And it was letterboxed as expected. But what surprised me was like it continued where I had left off in the game. So it's like a physical media still created today that saves to the cartridge. I had no idea. I just assumed it was on the system.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense though that it's that way.
It does.
Just like that, because there's no SD card slot or anything. You know, you'd be limited to whatever you have.
Right. I mean, I don't even know like how much internal storage any of these Evercade systems
and all
have.
games support save states, except for I think all the emulated games support save states. But yeah, I mean, I really love what Evercade is doing. I just think that they are making something that's great for, retro collectors today. You know, just these great collections. They have a lot of like really interesting stuff and unknown stuff on there, just all mixed in.
And the games
what you
like
get for $20 or $25.
Well,
I think some of them are like more.
They used to be $20, which I thought was insane. So I think it's pretty understandable that they tend to be $30 now. I still think that's like a crazy good deal for like a physical game. Like, that's as low as it gets. And there's a lot of good stuff on them, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really, really cool, man.
What about you? What have you been playing?
Well, actually, a couple things. First of all, I've been playing through all of the Quake 2 stuff, the Night Dive version of Quake 2. I was in the mood for some Quake 2 again recently. So I've just been blasting through at 330 frames per second with a different scanline filter that simulates more of a VGA monitor look. So it looks like, and I really love the way it looks. And I especially love the Call of the Machine campaign that they've created for that new version of Night Dive, because it kind of throws around so many enemies in a way that Quake 2 normally does not, because hardware at the day could not have handled it. So you got giant crowds and these big situations and scenarios and gorgeous levels that are just like taking Quake 2 as a canvas and essentially exploding it out to find its full potential. And it's just awesome. I really love what they did with that. And it's just an awesome version of the game. So I love revisiting all these classic titles. And so yeah, that's been one of them. The other one is I installed one of the laminated LCDs in my PSP, which I may have mentioned before. Right. And I started to experiment with 60 FPS patches for games. So like Burnout Legends, Crazy Taxi, various others, where people made cheats primarily for use with the PSP emulator out there, but you can actually apply them on a real PSP. And if you overclock the system and apply it there, in some of those games, you can actually get a pretty nice 60 FPS.
Wow. Some
of the more demanding games are more like unstable, like MotorStorm, Arctic Edge is more like 40 FPS. You can't actually get 60 on real hardware. So like some of those patches are very much clearly just designed for emulation. And then others are like, well, you can actually get 60 FPS on an overclocked PSP, which is really cool to see. But obviously it does have an impact on battery life because it pushes the system a lot harder. And I can see why, if they had stock clocks plus battery concerns back in the day, I can see why they would have said, 30 FPS for Burnout. Let's just do it just because of that, right? Like it makes sense, but it's neat to see that you can actually kind of overcome that now, thanks to modern applications.
I wonder if they could be overclocked on a PS TV, because there is an application, a plugin that allows you to overclock the system, and I wonder if that would just carry over to the PSP games being
there should be a
emulated on
way to do it. I haven't tested that. It should be the same on just a regular Vita as well, because the Vita adds a lot of like extra performance. All it is you're essentially on PSP. You have to install a plugin on your custom firmware that you bring up, and you turn on this plugin, and during the game you just hold select button and it brings up the cheat menu, and then you have to manually insert the code for the cheat that you want into the database file beforehand. But once you do that, you just hit select cheats and you'll see like 60 FPS codes show up. You just check that, turn on the cheats, and go, and it works. So
that would probably help with some of the input lag issues that you can run into on running PSP games through the like Adrenaline or whatever.
Yeah.
So, just having a good time there.
Speaking about overclocking, I haven't done too much research into this, but have you heard about the that mod chip thing that's coming out for the PS3 that allows it to you to overclock the system?
This is actually the system can be overclocked in software. It doesn't need a mod chip to do it. What you're thinking of is the Raspberry Pi thing,
right? Yeah, that's it.
Which is specifically, I believe, for the super slim models to overcome their limitations with jailbreaking, if I recall.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So it's basically allowing them to use the super slims for all of this as well. And the reason you would want to use a super slim is because that would have the smallest, coolest hardware, right? I think they were down to 45 nanometer. And so people have been able to overclock the cell up to I think it's 6 gigahertz and massively overclock RSX. I'm in the process of working on getting one of these. And I want to do a video on it basically called the PS3 Pro.
Yeah. Because
we'll see what happens.
I have a Slim, and it's actually in the shop right now because the Slims have a problem with their Bluetooth receivers in them just dying. So I'm getting the Bluetooth receiver in mine swapped. But maybe I should talk to the person doing it and be like, hey, do you want to install this? If I bought this, would you install this?
Yeah, but
it might be fun.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if you get that before I come visit John, that would be pretty fun, I would say, to play around with overclocked PS3.
I'm hearing good things about it. It's not a magic bullet, but it does seem to help in a lot of games. So, and I think it's extremely relevant to today's topic. So why don't we transition over to Unreal Engine 3? Unreal Engine 3, love it or hate it, it could be argued that it is the most influential game engine of all time. The impact that this engine had on the industry as a whole cannot be overstated. You think about where we're at, how ubiquitous Unreal is, both in terms of good and bad things, what it's led to, things like Fortnite. There's just so much here that goes back to this. And Unreal Engine predates Unreal Engine 3, obviously, based on the number, but it's the point where it really, really took off and got a chokehold on the industry, I would say. So before we dive into the history of this, gentlemen, I want to ask, Marc, when you hear somebody mention Unreal Engine 3, what comes to mind for you? What do you think of?
The image that comes to mind for me, and I don't know if this was specifically something to do with Unreal Engine 3 or if this was just kind of the style of the day, but I always think of crushed black levels and really kind of noisy specular highlights and really bloomy skies and stuff. When Team Ninja reveals new games today, obviously they're not running on Unreal Engine 3 or any kind of Unreal. But I remember when Final Fantasy Stranger of Paradise was announced from Team Ninja, people were like, this looks like a PS3 game. And I think it's because it's there's something about that sort of crushed dark detail that's in it and sort of the noisy image quality that makes the specular highlights look not super great on a lot of Team Ninja games. think it's the memory of Unreal Engine 3 that's making people trigger that association. Does that make sense, or am I off base here?
That's pretty funny, actually. And
Yeah.
there's a whole section where we dig very specifically into the Unreal Engine 3 look, which I think is exactly what you're describing there, Mark. So
Yeah.
there's a lot there. But what about you, Coury?
This could also be attributed to the Unreal Engine 3 look, but I think of big beefy dudes without necks and giant thighs and calves. I don't know. Like, I just feel like that was like the look of a lot of games, and chasing the Gears of War look with like these just giant guys. But I want to throw this out there, and I just thought of this, is I often think of hilarious ragdoll dead bodies just flinging around. Like after like an enemy dies and they're just laying there, if you like bump up against them, they're just like blah, flying around.
I also think of really ugly shadow maps. Like just I mean, especially on console. I mean, I was playing Unreal Engine 3 games mostly on PS3 probably, but then toward the end of that generation, I was playing some on PC, like some of the Mass Effect games and BioShock and stuff like that, BioShock Infinite. But I especially on console, I just think of those like really jagged shadows and ugh.
Well, I'm glad you specified BioShock Infinite, by the way, because BioShock 1 and 2 are not Unreal Engine 3 games.
Oh, wait, really? What am I confusing it with then?
Those are Unreal Engine 2 games.
No way. Really?
They are indeed.
Okay, I did not know this actually. No way.
Oh yes, they are. They are indeed. It's heavily modified, of course, but yes, that is not Unreal Engine 3. So.
Well, it's so interesting because, I mean, I'm sure this will be part of our history lesson here, because Unreal Engine 2 is not something that you hear people talk about a lot.
No, and it was fairly ubiquitous, as we'll discuss, but not nearly as ubiquitous as Unreal Engine 3, which was just everywhere. Just a huge number of games were made on this engine. What was it, like well over 100, I would say.
Oh yeah,
it was everywhere. But
yeah, it was used up until the last game that came out on it was in 2020. So I mean, that's a huge chunk of time. I mean, the first game came out on it in like 2006.
It was right? Exactly. It was around the Gears time.
That's insane, really.
So let's get into this then. I kind of feel like for those kind of tuning in here, I want to walk back a little bit and kind of start back at the beginning. And maybe this will be useful for you guys as well. But when you think of like a game engine today, we instantly think of stuff like Unreal Engine. But it wasn't like it wasn't something that you just would naturally use when building software in the past. Because in the early days, most companies making any sort of video game, whether it was for a console or a personal computer or anything else, they essentially had to develop their own in-house technology every time. You're basically programming for the hardware and you were just kind of creating it as you go. But obviously it was pretty quickly discovered that, sharing technology and code that you maybe developed for one product can be useful in another future product. And we started to see that take hold. I think some of the more popular examples from the early days, especially on PC, would have been what LucasArts and Sierra were doing. Like they had the Scum engine, and Sierra had AGI and SCI games, which is essentially like utilities and like SDKs basically that allowed them to easily create those types of point-and-click adventure games. And it really aided development. They also added some other tools in there over time to add things like full motion video and 3D objects and all that. But that was really, really important. But I've always felt like the point where we really started to see a shift, and it's not necessarily the first of this, but we started to see a shift with the release of Doom, right? Because Doom, beyond the modding side, which would follow in its wake, I remember id Software allowing other developers to utilize the engine to create games. I think one of the most popular examples is Raven Software's Heretic, which they worked closely with. You guys remember that?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
I love Heretic. I think retrospectively it's called id Tech 1. There was also Strife, Quest for the Sigil from Rogue Entertainment, as well as Hexen. So a few, these were developers that were closely associated with id, but they were not id Software itself necessarily. So it was kind of like going outside of that. And then there was some other games as well that would use it. Like obviously, I think one of the popular ones from the time was Chex Quest,
Yep. Oh, yeah.
which is,
I loved Chex Quest back in the day.
and there's other stuff as well, but that's kind of like, that was a big inflection point for the industry. But I think where it genuinely changed was the next engine, Quake Engine, because Quake Engine was so powerful and just so impressive for the time that id Software did actually start licensing this out to other software developers. And we saw a lot of games made with this engine. I mean, when you think about the Quake engine, like what comes to mind? Like Coury, what do you think of?
The Quake engine. It's the first Half-Life Quake engine.
You got it.
Is it? Oh, I did not know that actually.
Okay. So that's obviously, this starts to get into this whole thing of like modifying engines, right? Because Half-Life itself was sort of a derivative of Quake Engine. It started on Quake Engine and then it became known as Gold Source, right? So, and it's their own engine with like, but it's derived from what they did on Quake. And then there was plenty of others as well. And then this continued with the Quake 2 engine, which got a lot more take up even. And I think these were extremely important for the future of games, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
Unreal. I recently did a DF retro on Unreal 1. I actually never asked you guys though. Did either of you actually play Unreal?
Oh, I did.
I played.
Yeah.
I played a little bit of it at your house when I was there last
right.
time, John.
That's right. What did you think about it, Coury? I mean, what do you remember?
It was amazing. I had never seen anything that looked like that before. I mean, famously, the game was on the cover of Next Gen magazine, where it said, "This is a real screenshot from the game." And I think I had a friend that I worked with at Electronics Boutique at the time that was big into getting, had a Voodoo 2 with two Voodoo 2s in SLI. So, he had me over after work one night and he's like, "Oh, check this out," and that immediately made me want to upgrade. It was that and Quake 2, seeing those in action on that system, that I was like, well, maybe I should upgrade my computer. But yeah, I hadn't seen anything like that. The way the game opens up and it kind of gives you the fly through of everything.
It's unreal.
Yeah, everything that we were seeing on, like the PS1 and Saturn at the time, like on consoles, like it just destroyed it in every possible way.
Yeah, it was a massive leap in overall detail levels, right? Like and that was like the hype around this game leading up to release. Epic had been showing this off for years, and I was familiar with Epic actually from Jazz Jackrabbit and Epic Pinball, both of which I had back in my 486. And I remember really loving those games. Like Jazz especially was a game that did 70 frames per second scrolling. It was very smooth. PC platformers were typically like very, very choppy at the time because PC hardware wasn't well suited to side scrolling, but these guys figured out how to do it at a super smooth frame rate. It was awesome. So yeah, I paid attention to Unreal. And what we've known since is that Epic and Tim Sweeney and all them, they didn't actually want to build an engine to license out, but developers wanted it. And Epic themselves even included Unreal Ed on the disc with the very first version of Unreal. And it seems that the first developer that ever got their hands on this engine, and this is a game I actually played back in the day as well, it was Microprose. And they released a Star Trek The Next Generation game called Klingon Honor Guard. And
didn't know about
Klingon
this.
Honor Guard has the honor of being the very first third-party developed Unreal Engine game ever. Right?
That's cool.
So outside of Epic, this was the next game with Unreal, which was pretty wild. I don't think people necessarily thought that much of it at the time. I liked this game, but it wasn't like super popular.
Yeah.
Making history though.
Yeah, I never, for someone who worked at a video game store, that had a lot of PC games, I don't recall this on the wall of big boxes at all.
Yeah, I mean, I was a fan of TNG at the time, of course, and they actually had Tony Todd as Captain Kern come in and play his role in this game, which was pretty cool. And it felt like it was a very authentic take on this. And I liked the idea of doing Star Trek, but a first-person shooter, and it's something that really hadn't been done, I would say, at that point. So, yeah, that caught my attention. Of course, the second game ever seems to have been, and I've never played this, TNN Outdoors Pro Hunter. So, yeah, hunting games.
Yeah, the hunting games are probably not calling to you, when you went to the store, like, oh, what could I buy? I'm going to get Pro Hunter.
But of course, the other big thing with Unreal Engine 1, and I would say arguably its biggest game with the greatest legacy, is the original Deus Ex, which came out in the year 2000.
Okay,
so,
yeah.
Unreal Tournament, huge games with Deus Ex, man. That was like the PC game. And this engine continued to be used, though. Like, Clive Barker's Undying used it. There was Rune, Viking Warlord. And various others as well. Duke Nukem Forever was originally being developed on Unreal Engine 1. if you didn't realize that, which is really, really crazy, actually. So at the time, we had like Quake Engine, Quake 2/Quake 3 engine. We had Unreal Engine. There was Lithtech Engine, various others like that, right? As well as, I guess, renderware, which is very important in the next generation. So Unreal Engine 2 then comes along. And I'm curious, is there anything that comes to mind for you guys regarding Unreal Engine 2? Like, when do you first remember seeing this or realizing that this was even a thing?
I mean, I remember
Earlier
people being
today.
really...
Really?
No.
I mean,
I just thought it's funny because they're like, really? That was Unreal Engine 2?
I did not know that, like, some games on PS360 era were Unreal 2, but I mean, I remember Unreal Tournament being a really big thing, but it was never something
Tournament
I was personally
1 was Unreal Engine 1, though. It was Tournament 2003 that used this.
Okay, yeah, and to be honest, I'm not sure which one it was. Like, I saw my cousin play, but like, I guess that was kind of when I was aware, but I wasn't really paying attention to games like that, these just like purely tournament shooter kinds of things. So I was not really paying that close attention to the engine, just out of lack of interest of those kinds of games.
Well, have you played Red Steel on the Wii? That's Unreal Engine 2.
I have not. I've always heard it's really bad, but I know Red Steel 2 is supposed to be pretty good. Don't know if it's still Unreal though. It's interesting. So. I never knew that Ubisoft ever licensed or used engines from another license.
Boy, did they know. Because their biggest title actually that used the second Unreal Engine was Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell. So pretty much all the Splinter Cell games up through Double Agent, maybe something like that. Maybe Conviction as well was still on it, but like they used it for years. And wait, even Blacklist. Okay, so like Splinter Cell was basically this generation of Unreal Engine.
So I mean, this is actually kind of interesting, John, because we're getting into games that are running on like PS2, GameCube, Xbox, Wii class hardware. So this is so when did Unreal games start to appear on consoles?
Right, like basically during the PS2 generation.
Okay.
So it just scaled right to it. Like they could easily scale it to that hardware.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of these games that did ship on that generation of consoles as well as PC, of course.
I mean, this was where multi-platform development, like as we know it today, was just starting to coalesce. Like games were still pretty different from system to system, but less so than they had been previously. So it's interesting that I mean, was the multi-platform development capability or the ability to export and compile for various systems, was that something that Epic implemented like of their own initiative, I wonder? Or was that something developers were requesting or something developers kind of had to hack into it themselves?
That's actually an interesting question because Unreal Engine 2, unlike 3, there wasn't as much like public facing information about like these types of features, right? But one has to believe that they did indeed make an environment that was at least conducive to multi-platform releases, given the number of games on here that use this engine and shipped across different platforms. But it feels like the most common use case here was Xbox and PC. Games that shipped on those platforms often used the second generation Unreal Engine. And, Deus Ex Invisible War, Thief, Deadly Shadows used it. Ubisoft's 13, which shipped on various consoles, that was Unreal Engine. Uh, Certain versions of Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter were Unreal Engine, the last gen versions. The Brothers in Arms games, uh, all of the stuff, Advent Rising, all Unreal Engine 2, Star Wars Republic Commando.
A lot of these games aren't really games that are in my wheelhouse, so I don't know if it's just because of my unfamiliarity, but I don't recall personally seeing like the Unreal Engine splash logo booting up games in this generation. I feel like I didn't start seeing that until PS3 360.
You would sometimes see it during these games. But
Yeah,
you're
so
right.
so they
It
did
wasn't
announce
as
their
prevalent.
presence. It was known.
Sure. But it wasn't as big of a deal. That's for sure. And you didn't really see it like as a major selling point, I think. Like you didn't see Ubisoft talking about Unreal when shipping 13, for instance.
Yeah.
Because you don't even see it on games now. Like, don't they pay more money to like not have to show the logo or something?
That's possible, indeed. The point is, though, is like this engine was pretty powerful and used for years. You didn't realize, Mark, but yeah, Bioshock 1 and 2, those were based on a modified version of this.
And I guess that's kind of the tail end, right?
Sure, yeah. And then when you get to Splinter Cell Chaos Theory as well, that's another game where you started to see a lot of modern features creeping into it. And I think that's really interesting, specifically because this is at the point not that far in where Epic started showing off the main topic of today, Unreal Engine 3. So this is interesting then. When we get to Unreal Engine 3, it was actually first shown publicly in the middle of 2004. We're at the tail end, but we're still in the middle of that current generation of consoles, PlayStation 2, Xbox, GameCube, and the like, right? But here comes Epic showcasing its brand new next generation technology. And this was the first time where I really feel like they came out with a very strong sort of like public showing, trying to illustrate what this new engine could do. And to understand why, I think we need to understand what was happening in 2004, because 2004 specifically is the final release year after having been shown of games like Far Cry, Doom 3, and Half-Life 2. These three games were pushing technology way beyond where the consoles were at the time. Even though we got Xbox ports of these games to some degree that were pretty compromised, but it was still like, it felt like a giant leap over where console gaming had been. And naturally, Epic wanted to push its own engine forward as well. And Unreal Engine 3, as first shown during this year, promised some major revelations. So the demo that was shown, it was an E3 2004 tech demo presentation. And this is actually kind of our first glimpse at the visual design that we would see in Gears of War, right?
Like that
Which itself,
features the Gothic.
yes, which itself is kind of derived from some of the Unreal Tournament 2K3 stuff, right? It's like an evolution of that. And I remember seeing this demo for the first time included in a DVD from E3 that year. And you get that Gothic architecture with that ruined cityscape. There's a fountain in the middle, and all around you is just what at the time seemed like this unbelievable level of detail, like so far beyond anything that you'd ever seen before. This did not seem like something that could actually ship in a game. It was just that crazy. And part of it comes down to several key technologies that they wanted to implement here. First of all, this was an engine focused at the time on DirectX 9 shader model 3. So it was pushing all the latest stuff in terms of rendering features and capabilities and going beyond really where the consoles were at the time. This was focused on the next generation. It hadn't been announced yet, but you could tell, like, okay, this is where consoles are going, this is where PCs are going, this is where the next generation will lead us. And it also allowed them to do high dynamic range rendering, not the television displays, but actually like an HDR pipeline. And you could do like tone mapping and all this kind of stuff. Again, this is something that Valve would play with the Source engine. Crytek did it with Far Cry. It was a big thing at the time. But the other major feature, and this is something that really was used a lot in those games as well, was the shift towards normal maps. Now, Try, if I ask you, like, just to tell me, like, at a glance, like, what does a normal map mean to you?
I mean, I remember the first time I heard about it was in relation to, I want to say, one of the Matrix games on original Xbox. Wasn't that kind of one of the first times that kind of tech appeared in hardware of that level of capacity, right?
Maybe a little bit. There was some of that, and I think the reason that you're thinking of that is because they did it on PlayStation 2 as well, and that was hardware that wasn't really technically capable of
but
this.
Like it's kind of it's a I guess a simple way to put it is it's a more advanced type of bump mapping. You get a little more depth and perspective and light response on the texture. Is that right?
It's kind of a good way to look at it. The idea, as it stands at the time, was that artists could build a super dense, high polygon model with extremely fine, precise detail carved into every facet, and then bake out those results as a texture, essentially, with properties that allow it to interact with light and everything correctly, light and shadow, and then apply it to a polygon model with far fewer triangles. The idea was that you could essentially cut back your triangle count by a lot, but still give the impression of a model that was exceptionally detailed.
Not like kind of the next step beyond that would be parallax occlusion maps.
It's very different. Very, very different.
They work in tandem, I guess, right?
Yes.
To get the full effect. That's what I meant.
Parallax occlusion maps, displacement mapping, that is something applied to surfaces. And this is something else that Unreal Engine 3 supports, where it's essentially using, you have like a flat surface, like a flat triangle wall, and you apply this texture to it, and using these sort of tricks, it gives you the impression of depth, actual, like, real, like, occlusion depth where like a stone can overlap another stone. There can even be shadow casting happening in there. But it's actually a flat surface. Normal maps, however, are just designed to essentially add additional detail to lower polygon models, and they're still used everywhere today. And obviously things have evolved a lot. But during this era, Epic was already thinking about this idea of like materials. This is not the era of physically correct rendering, although Unreal Engine 3 would eventually get PBR materials, which is really interesting, much, much later, but it does happen. But this is still like them, when they're presenting this initial demo, it's this idea of like things like metal and stone reacting to light. There's specular highlights on everything that makes it look more realistic in a way that we really hadn't seen before, right? They also showed off all these light functions that allowed you to create very complex effects with like real-time lights that would cast colors and shadows, and everything would be unified. So like it was kind of like Doom 3, but with soft shadows and just far more granularity. That was like the idea that they wanted to deliver, and they show all of this in that original 2004 demo. In the end, however, most of this did not happen. Because they would actually show Gears of War multiple times in the lead up to the launch of Xbox 360 during the early days. And, you know, I've talked a lot about Xbox 360 recently in that video series, but Gears played a big part of it. But all those are early showings. Did you guys ever see Gears of War like pre-release and see just how choppy it was? It was
No, but looking at this tech demo, you can
Yeah.
see a lot of screen tearing in there, and
Yeah.
And this still would have been running on a PC. But even then, when they finally showed the early, I can't remember when it would have first been shown, maybe 2005 somewhere, like possibly TGS 05. But there was a tech demo where they showed them pushing a car down to the gas station during that early part of the second chapter. And it still had all these real-time dynamic lights everywhere that were fully shadow casting. And all of that stuff was ripped out of the game when it shipped. Because it was just apparently too much. And this is unfortunately what started to define the look of Unreal Engine 3. So ultimately, the first games that launched with Unreal Engine 3, the ones to finally ship, all happened in the end of 2006. So this is the year we just talked about in our last episode, right? And these first games were on Xbox 360. And it was, I guess Gears of War is the first real big Unreal Engine 3 game to arrive. But the path to reach this point was pretty crazy. So have you guys heard about this? There was talk about the memory incident on Xbox 360 leading up to its launch with Epic Games. Have you heard about this?
I have not heard about this.
What makes it an incident? Is it scandalous?
So the Xbox 360 has 512 megs of RAM, right? And it's a unified pool of RAM as well, which is really cool. That's something the PS3 definitely does not have. But apparently, on the lead up to releasing this console, Microsoft originally wanted to ship it with just 256 megabytes of RAM. And apparently it was Epic Games and Unreal Engine 3 and everything there that they used to essentially tell Microsoft, like, look, you can't ship this with 256 megabytes of memory. It's just not going to be enough. We need more. And so the legend goes. And as a result, the system, they ended up doubling the amount of memory in there.
Wow. Well, and they were still able to release it for such an affordable price, really. So
I wonder how late in development. I wonder if that required them to really rework things very much, or is it just all right? We can.
I'm not entirely sure about that. And actually, I feel like something similar happened with the PlayStation 4, even where that was going to possibly have 4 gigabytes of RAM, but then they saw, or maybe caught wind of Microsoft doing 8. And so Sony also did 8, but their RAM was faster, which gave it an advantage. But here as well, the 360 with its unified memory pool and full 512 megs of RAM versus PS3, which is split between VRAM and system RAM. This ended up being a really important thing for the system. But then, obviously before any UE3 games had shipped, the PS3 was shown again at E3 2000. Well, I guess it was first shown in 2005, a lot of fake tech demos. And at that show, they actually did show something that was real, which was an Unreal Engine 3 demo. And this was using characters that would appear in Unreal Tournament 3, which would wind up being like one of the first, not necessarily the first, but one of the first big UE3 games to show off the engine on PS3. But surely you guys remember, though, that Unreal Engine 3 didn't get along well with the PlayStation 3.
Oh, yeah. I mean, was there any game that ran better on the PS3 that was Unreal Engine?
Better?
Yeah, probably
not. Or
not,
as
right?
good, maybe?
There's probably some that run about the same, but that's about it. I don't think there's going to be even a single game based on Unreal Engine that ran better on PlayStation 3.
Yeah.
It was a serious problem for Sony, I think. The PS3 ended up getting some really good results from other custom engines, but with the way Unreal Engine 3 works, this ended up being a problem for multi-platform games throughout the entire generation. They did improve it a lot by the end, for sure, but it was still pretty subpar, I would say, compared to where 360 was.
Yeah, well, and of course, I don't know if I made a big distinction because at the time, I did not have a 360. I had a PS3, didn't play a lot of PC games. And so I kind of just lumped Unreal Engine 3 performance in with a lot of the other engines that didn't run amazing on PS3, Bethesda stuff and lots of other games were not necessarily running that well on PS3 anyway. And I kind of just, in my head, characterized it as all just part of just how this generation of games is. I was aware that multi-platform games were generally running better on 360, even though I didn't have it myself. But this is kind of what led to me going through, sort of a brief phase with PC gaming at the end of that generation, because I knew like PS3 versions of some of these high-profile Unreal games were just not going to be running that well. I mean, BioShock Infinite was one of the first, games that I played on PC in lieu of the PS3 version, because I was just like, oh, I bet this is going to be real bad on PS3.
While we're talking about incidents, though, do you guys remember the Silicon Knights one?
Well, I mean, Silicon Knights itself is like nothing but an incident.
Oh, is this Dennis Dyack said that you couldn't work with it for Too Human, like it just like drove him crazy, like they
right.
Okay.
It was too complicated. And he tried to sue him.
Yeah, exactly. So first of all, man, Silicon Knights from that era is insane to me, because like these are guys that managed to go from doing this pretty fun but very janky game on PlayStation, which, the original Legacy of Kain. I like it, but it's super janky. Somehow they struck up a relationship with Nintendo, made the very well received Eternal Darkness, which started life in N64, but they released it on GameCube. And so they became essentially a second party with Nintendo, which is amazing. And then somehow these guys managed to work a deal with Nintendo and Konami and Kojima to remake Metal Gear Solid. I still can't understand how this happened. Yeah. But like when you think about it, it's like these guys are like on top of the world.
Yeah.
And then for whatever reason, that I guess fell apart. They went their separate ways, and they started working on Too Human, which is a game that had started life during the PlayStation 1 era as well. It'd been around for a long time.
That's right. Yeah.
And they were working on it for Xbox 360 using Unreal Engine 3. And in 2007, Silicon Knights sued Epic Games, alleging that they'd failed to provide a working version of UE3 and intentionally sabotage licensees to benefit their own game, Gears of War. Now, I can see how someone might get angry during development over, because this was still early days for this stuff, right? But that was obviously a step too far. And it turns out that, so a lot of other companies were obviously using Unreal Engine. This was the only one to sue. And Epic countersued them, accusing Silicon Knights of breaching their contract by copying UE3 code into their proprietary engine to develop games. And the court in 2012 ruled in favor of Epic. Thus, Silicon Knights had to pay $9 million and destroy all unsold copies of their UE3 games, such as Too Human. Yeah. Which, by the way, when Too Human came out, not super well received. I didn't hate it, but it didn't run very well.
It's a weird game.
Yeah. You could very clearly see all the Unreal Engine 3 like traits there as well.
The big beefy dudes, right?
Yeah. But it's still available for free on Xbox today, is it not? Like,
is it?
I think
it was free at one point.
It was free at some point. Like, Bobby, you can still buy it, can't you? Or acquire
I don't think
it
it's backwards compatible.
I think it is. I think it is.
It does say you can buy it for free.
I think it's backwards compatible. Well,
that's their way of getting around it.
If you can buy it, that means it's backwards compatible because they shut down the 360 store.
So this must be a case. I didn't actually realize that either, but this must be a case of where they essentially were able to put it back out there for free. They just can't charge money for it.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
But man, Silicon Knights, what a... I think they got a little too full of themselves, I think.
But they sure did. But I feel like when you say the big beefy dudes again, Corey, this kind of brings us to the Unreal Engine 3 look that you mentioned earlier as well, Mark.
Yeah.
Like this idea of like why do Unreal Engine 3 games look a certain way? And I have a few things about it. First of all, they don't all look the same. There are actually some Unreal Engine games that really do look unique, and we'll talk about them. But it's true that a lot of these games, the second you lay eyes on them, your brain is just like, oh, that's an Unreal Engine 3 game. For better or for worse.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of this stems from what the work they did in Gears, I would say. And before we talk about the bad parts of this, I do want to, I feel like we need to talk about the good, right? Because quite frankly, when Gears of War dropped in 2006, it was genuinely like a leap beyond anything we'd seen before.
Yep.
It may have aged somewhat roughly now, but at the time, like the level of detail on display, like the complexity of the environments, it was really, really beautiful. It was a great looking game. I'll never forget that second level, walking around at dusk and just seeing all that architecture everywhere. It really did, in my mind, look a lot like those tech demos. I didn't yet realize or like connect the dots like, wait a minute, they're missing a bunch of stuff compared to those tech demos. It didn't matter yet. At the time, when you first played it, you're just like, wow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like you guys played Gears around launch, right? Or at least you did, Corey, right?
Yeah, I played it at a friend's house. But yeah, I mean, it was just, I mean, we talked about this a little bit in the last episode, but it was just unlike anything that I had seen up to that point. When I say like big beefy dudes, I just feel like all of the, like all characters like look like they're just like, there's just a lot to them. Like they're just very thick and big. You know what I mean? Like they're just, does that make sense? I know it sounds like so stupid, but
it's so silly to say it, but you're not that wrong.
Well, and there's kind of a grittiness to like the skin texture as well, right?
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, I'm just talking about how thick like all the characters are. And everyone just like looks real.
A lot of games did this.
It's so true, but hearing you like harp on it is just hilarious to me.
Yeah, I mean,
it's funny. It is funny.
That's just the impression that it's always made on me.
That's also just this generation of games, though.
Yeah,
Turok 2008 also had that going on. Oh man, there's so many games early on that did this. It was about big beefy dudes. Part of it, though, I actually think it stems from when you build out the whole character with like armor and suits, it automatically makes them look beefier than they might otherwise look. And this was a time of sci-fi games that became popular thanks to stuff like Gears, right? So like dudes in suits, like Mass Effect, guess what? Dudes in suits. Turok 2008, guess what? More dudes in suits, right? Like it's all about like guys wearing big suits, which is then combined with the bald space marine trope, which people joke about that, but in my mind, the reason that this became a thing is because hair rendering at the time was very difficult. And dropping a normal mapped chunk of polygon hair on a model didn't usually look very good at all.
I mean, BioWare in particular, I always thought, because BioWare lets you make your own character, right? And it kind of just made you want to stick with that default, male shepherd, because if you put hair on him, it looks, I don't know if it was just BioWare or Unreal, because I believe the version of Unreal they used was pretty modified for Mass Effect, but BioWare always had really bad looking hair in their game.
But at the same time, that's the thing, is they were able to render fairly convincing like human models, like the face, the facial expressions, as well as like a shaved head look, like the Coury look there. Like they could do that really well. I love that when you look at the box of Too Human as well, as we were just talking about it.
Yeah,
it's literally just like bald man with big armor on.
Yeah,
but my point though is that all of this was born out of what this type of engine and this type of rendering did best. Specular highlights, granular detailed textures, lots of like reflective stuff and metals, right? Unreal Engine was basically defined by gloss and specularity that kind of made everything look somewhat wet and like metal all the time, which is specifically why I think
Wet metal.
A lot of games went with this like armored look, because the metal armor could render really well in Unreal Engine 3, and you could show off all these new effects. And then combine that with the hair situation, where hair tended to look pretty bad. And the big thing that I think really contributed to this is that there was this heavy focus on high contrast visuals, right? Like dark black shadows, wet textures, and metal.
That's what I think of. And you know what's nice about it too, I guess, is, you know, I'm sure at some point they started getting SSR into UE3 games, but most of this UE3 era was like pre screen space reflections. And I hate screen space reflections. I think they're going to age badly in the long run. And, you know, if you could look at one thing in Unreal Engine 3 that's probably aged well, it's just these cube map reflections, which I think, you know, even if they're inaccurate or not all that well aligned, I think are just more artifact free compared to SSR. So like there is something nice about the reflective, you know, fake reflective materials in these UE3 games oftentimes.
You're right, but I'm talking more in general about just like specular reflection.
Right. Which is why
environment.
Which is why I say when I see some of these newer games that obviously aren't running on UE3, like the Team Ninja games, there's something about that sort of just sort of unrefined image quality combined with the way they do specularity that just really brings me back to that UE3 era, where there's just lots of little speckles in the materials.
I think part of the problem stems from the way characters are lit in these games and the way lighting works in general. There's not a lot of direct real-time lighting in games. This is one of the main things that was eliminated from the 2004 demos, right? So most characters are lit instead by like spherical harmonics that would just kind of sample the light around the character. And so you end up with a lot of this like very incoherent lighting that gives them this glowy look. So you're like running around through like dark areas. There's lights there's like baked lighting around you, but there's no actual real direct light on the character. And it just makes them kind of stand out in a weird way and glow. That's where you get this Unreal Engine 3 glow from that most characters kind of exhibit. If you actually look for this, you will see it in any game, that the character just kind of like floats in the scene.
Yeah, they have like kind of a halo of light look around them almost.
Right.
Which is a problem that something like Doom 3, for instance, didn't have, because it went for that fully unified, it's more limited in a lot of ways, but a fully unified lighting model where everything was lit and shadowed by real lights. And so the characters perfectly integrate into the world.
I would say that the first time I really noticed like kind of the distinction between UE3 and UE4 was when you did start seeing a lot more of that kind of like environmental light bounce on characters in UE4 games, where, you know, you're next to kind of a red rock that the sun is shining on, and then there's a little bit of a red glow on your character. Like that was like, I'm just like, oh, that's a really noticeable difference in like this new era of, you know, engine technology.
So actually, that's a really interesting point, because that's specifically what sort of divides early generation Unreal Engine 3 games from later generation games. And I think it was around the time of Gears of War 3 that Epic itself came up with the solution. And this is the next part that kind of defined the earlier Unreal Engine 3 look. And it's the lack of any sort of indirect lighting. That is, in those shadowed regions, there is no light. So there's no light contribution that the player is going to visibly see outside of like some basic light map stuff. But it just created a lot of this like weird, deep contrast that didn't feel very natural. Shadowed areas weren't lit appropriately, and everything kind of had this like almost grayish, overly specular look. But with Gears of War 3, I think this is when Epic itself first introduced what they call light mass, which is and this was used in Unreal Engine 4 as well. And this is their pre-calculated global illumination system that goes through and actually figures that stuff out. And you end up with essentially what are like light maps that properly contribute this indirect light to the scene that then the characters can sample from, so they actually sit better within the environment. And you really see this in Gears 3, where all of a sudden the characters, like running through like some of the desert areas, for instance, they actually seem to be connected to the world now, and the light from the sand and the surroundings sort of like impacts them, and everything using that and beyond. I really feel like they really stepped up the lighting game. And we'll get to that because we're still talking about the early generation. And I actually want to highlight an example of this problem being tackled early on, because 2006, 2007, 2008, or whatever, they mostly didn't have this. It just had that traditional super punchy UE3 look that we've been talking about. But there was one notable exception. Do you guys remember what that is?
Mirror's Edge.
Bingo. Mirror's Edge.
Good shout.
Even though DICE would very quickly become known specifically for the Frostbite engine, Mirror's Edge is a game that they built using Unreal. And they took a different approach by implementing a full global illumination, pre-calculated global illumination system into the game, which actually gives it that full, like, radiant GI appearance. And it was awesome. Right? Like, it really changed the look of that game.
The flat look of the entire game, just like it works really well in terms of it makes it look so much different. Like there's a lack of detail that helps out.
Right. All that stark white with those like bright colors, right?
Get running, girl.
So looking at that initial first 3 years or so, I think we have a lot of games that we can say that look traditional UE. You know, Gears of War was that. There was Medal of Honor Airborne, Black Site Area 51, Mass Effect, Turok, things like that, right? Who can forget, though, that Mistwalker used Unreal Engine 3 to make Lost Odyssey?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. That's not a game that I really think about as being UE3, but you are right.
So, I mean, that's a prime example of people saying, like, you know, not all games look like, you know, Gears of War. You know, like, yeah, there's Mirror's Edge, but I would not have known that Lost Odyssey was an Unreal Engine game just from, like, screenshots or anything like that, or seeing, like, a video of the game in motion.
Unlike so many of those other ones. Exactly. Yeah. It did have a really unique appearance. I mean, if you know what to look for, you can definitely see that Unreal Engine 3 stuff going on there, but it still felt unique. And they really pushed that. I think it was kind of in vogue after the TV show 24. You know, Jack Bauer's antics pushed that multi-window approach to storytelling.
Yeah.
Right. That was very popular for a while.
I like to believe that it's inspired by Phantasy Star 4. Not really. I'd like to pretend that it is.
I don't think the engine was very well suited to displaying those multiple viewports.
That's essentially doing split screen, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's a game that benefits massively from backwards compatibility. That's actually a game where the Xbox One X doesn't completely smooth it out, and you really need the Series X to smooth out those multi-viewport scenes in Lost Odyssey.
Now, what's interesting during this period, though, is that this is when we started to see the aforementioned PS3 issues with games like Medal of Honor Airborne, Stranglehold, Black Site Area 51. There was Turok 2008. And then, of course, the really, really bad Spark Unlimited titles like Turning Point Fall of Liberty, which, have you guys played any of those titles, by the way?
Mm-mm.
What is it?
There was Turning Point Fall of Liberty. There was what's the other one? I'm trying to look for it right now. I'm forgetting the name. Legendary. It was called Legendary. That's what it was called.
That name
is
sounds
Legendary
familiar.
the dragon with the dragons?
Maybe, but these are some of the worst first-person shooters I've ever had the pleasure of touching. Hour of Victory. I don't think they did Hour of Victory, but that was also an early one and really, really terrible. No, that was not Spark, but it has all the spirit of a Spark Unlimited game. Those were bad and definitely not a good, but we also had some other weird stuff from this era too. 50 Cent Blood on the Sand was Unreal Engine 3.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Which is like a very expensive game now.
Really?
It's cool. I like the game.
It's supposed to be pretty good, yeah.
Also,
There's another big beefy dude.
absolutely there is. So that's one. There's also The Wheelman starring Skim Beeble.
Yeah, I was just now watching a video clip of that, and this is like insane to me. He's like jumping from like car to car and then like breaking in through the window and like while the other car is moving. Looks kind of awesome.
Yeah.
But I guess my point there was like all these types of games that shipped on 360 and PS3. The PS3 versions always had major performance issues. And by that I mean the frame rate was lower. There was visual effects missing, like motion blur would often be off or things would be toned back. Loading times were worse. It just felt really, really janky compared to the 360 version in a lot of cases. There was another game. Do you remember Fatal Inertia from Koei?
I know the name.
I remember the name. It's like you fly like a plane or something like that. It's like kind of a racing game, but it's like
it's like zero G, like flying cars kind of thing. It was announced first as a PS3 game, but then it shipped on 360 first. And I always found that kind of ironic because like announcing a UE3 based racing game and showing it first in PlayStation 3, they were set up for failure. And they didn't have a chance. So that was not good. There was also do you remember, this never came out, but Coded Arms Assault.
I remember the name. I didn't associate it with a game that didn't come out though.
Coded Arms, that's a PS2 game, right? This is your first Coded Arms?
It's PSP.
Okay.
But there was at the 2006 conference a very cool trailer for Coded Arms Assault was shown for PlayStation 3. And this was going to be an Unreal Engine 3 game as well from Konami. And as far as I can tell, this seems to have been a victim of them really struggling with the engine on the PS3 and then ultimately canning the game. So I feel like there was just a lot happening early on where games just were not working all that well on Sony's machine, but doing okay on 360, albeit at 30 FPS max and often lower than that. Because if you recall, performance also was a bit of an issue, like especially in games like Mass Effect, where Mass Effect was really dinged for this early on. A great game, but the frame rate was often terrible. There was serious issues with texture loading. Lots of memes about that, if you recall, where texture pop-in would occur. Like it would, every time the angle would change, you get to new areas, you would actually see blurry surfaces and then it would draw in the texture. Most 360 games that ran on this engine were at least fairly playable, I would say.
Yeah. Was screen tearing like a normal problem? Because I feel like
it was.
It's something that I didn't notice as much at the time, but going back to some of these games, I'm like, holy cow, there's a lot of screen tearing going on in most of these games.
More so, I don't know why, but it always seemed to be more of an issue on 360 than PS3, and I don't know if that has something to do with the dev kits or the way that the frame buffers work or what.
So 360 had a special pool of memory. Was it the ED-RAM Xbox 360? I think it was called the ED-RAM, where they had 10 megabytes of it. Yeah, it was ED-RAM directly on the chip. And this limited the frame buffer size. It was designed for tiling, I guess. But I think the issue was that doing triple buffering within that smaller frame buffer was prohibitive enough that a lot of games just shipped with double buffer with a dynamic VSync. Whereas on PlayStation 3, most games were able to use triple buffering, which actually adds an extra frame of lag, but you do get that variable frame rate without screen tearing.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that there weren't games on PS3 with tearing.
Sure.
One such Unreal Engine 3 game was the Medal of Honor 2010, which was the Dude Bro shooter. You remember that?
Oh, yeah. The guy with the big beard, right?
Yeah. Oh, my God. I remember I bought a copy of that for like $5 or something many, many years ago because I was just curious. And I
Yeah.
put it into my PS3 and I actually burst out laughing. I was like, this is what AAA games were? Like, really?
Yeah.
Like, it runs at like 20 FPS with like nonstop tearing, and it's just this. It's one of the worst things I've ever played. Like, I just cannot
killed
believe.
the series.
I mean, the series kind of it had another installment past that was based on Frostbite engine. Although I think even the 2010 version had Frostbite powering the multiplayer, but the campaign was Unreal Engine 3, which is super weird.
Yeah.
But I'm a little bit scattered here because there's just so many games and so much to talk about. But I guess let me throw it to you guys then. During the first 3, 4, 5 years, like what Unreal Engine games stand out to you? And is there any that sort of catches your interest that you wanted to mention before we get to the second half?
I mean, we're talking like pre Gears of War 2, right? Because that's where a lot of the enhancements.
Gears of War 2 was 2008, so you can talk Gears 2.
I mean, Gears 2 was. I'll always remember when they revealed the Unreal Engine improvements for that, and they had the big meat cube.
The cube of meat.
A very good game is X-Men Origins Wolverine. Much better than the movie that it's associated with.
Yeah, I keep hearing
your
that.
Character
really
kind of gets blown. Like Wolverine gets blown apart. It's ultra violent, and you can like see through him at times. That's another example of like a big burly beefy dude.
Fun fact: did you know that X-Men Origins Wolverine came out on the PS2 as well?
I did.
I did know that, but I mean, how did that? I have no idea what it looks like.
The same game.
It is not Unreal Engine 3. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
One other thing that I wanted, like, it's 2009, but it's also the Unreal Engine being used in a different context, but also retaining that same look, which is Shadow Complex.
That's right.
Yes,
like a side-scrolling game, but it definitely looks like an Unreal Engine game.
A couple of the ones that come to mind for me from I think earlier years is Batman Arkham Asylum, obviously. I think that's like a key really good one. And if I'm not mistaken, I mean, it's been a long time since I played it, but the PS3 version of that is pretty good, right?
Actually, that's a good point. The PS3 version of the 2 Batman games, actually pretty good. They did a good job reining it in and actually making something decent.
Yeah, and it looks great. I mean, I think the character models in that game actually hold up really well.
Yeah. They're big and beefy though.
Yeah, they sure are.
You see Jim Gordon in those games? My goodness.
Even Jim Gordon. Yep.
It looks like he's like roided up for years, man.
Yeah.
Good Lord. Batman, we got a problem, and his like biceps are like.
But one that I also always think of that did not run well on PS3, and I'm not even sure this ran well on 360, is Ninja Theory's Enslaved: Odyssey to the West.
Oh yeah.
That ran bad.
I liked that game, but
I liked it, but oof.
Yeah.
The second half, especially, like I played it on 360 first, and the second half of that game is like basically 15 FPS of tearing all the time. It's really choppy.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it got a really nice PC version, which is excellent. And by the way, it plays super good on the Steam Deck.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's also backwards compatible on.
It is,
Xbox
but
Series
I think it's just a 30 FPS game there. At least it's stable now, but like,
the
PS3 version then was just a mess.
Didn't Ninja Theory's DMC also use Unreal?
Oh, yes, it sure did. And again, we'll get to that shortly because that's like the second half. And I guess that's kind of the point here is that the first 5 or 6 years of Unreal Engine 3 all looked kind of one way. And then there's a point, and I guess a lot of the improvements made with Gears of War 3 and beyond, where suddenly things started to shift and we saw some big changes. Although even just before that, there was some pretty cool stuff. Like one I want to mention is Alice Madness Returns. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, gosh, the hair in that game is like insanely good. Still.
It's cool.
Well, you know what's weird though? I was actually booting that up on my new PC. And I haven't installed it yet. I guess there's mods. Hopefully it works on Linux. But like the PC version of that game is like locked to like 29 or 31 frames per second or something like that.
You can uncap it, and I've done it even on the Steam Deck. So.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, but like even on consoles, like Alice's hair looks awesome in that game. Like looks good today. Like it looks like I almost can't even describe how it looks or how, I don't know how it works, but it like something about the technique used in that doesn't look like other hair techniques you usually see. Like, do you know anything about that? Like it just looks really good.
Yeah, I don't actually remember what they did specifically with the hair, or what. Like this was pre.
Pre-Tress
There was
effects.
pre-Tress effects, or maybe around the time of the NVIDIA stuff with hair. Like this was an interesting time period where a lot of developers were trying to solve the hair problem. And I think it's very funny because we very specifically were just talking about
Yeah.
Unreal Engine 3 being terrible at hair, but this was clearly an exception where the developer was like, we got to do something about this.
It
And they
looks
did.
better than hair in a lot of games released today.
I agree. Like games like this they really took some of the stuff into their own hands and came up with some really cool solutions, and it makes a big difference.
By this point, a lot of developers kind of knew about the reputation that Unreal Engine 3 games had, and were also pushing back against kind of some of the tropes that people were calling out, like, oh, all games are, gray and brown and overly dark and stuff. And so you did start to see some games that used cell shading and stuff like that on Unreal 3, because there was like Fat Princess on PlayStation Network and other games like that were like trying to kind of go the other way. Yeah, they were trying to go the other way, infuse a lot of color, a little more cartoonish stylistic designs and stuff like that to make it so that their games just didn't feel like they were trying to be, Gears of War and Mass Effect, right?
Yeah, I actually think Borderlands is an especially interesting case because when it was first shown, it had that sort of like Unreal Engine 3 look, right? With the more realistic, like overly specular characters and stuff and the beefy dudes. And then it changed. And then when it finally showed up again and then released, it had the cel shaded look, which ended up defining like the style of the series. And it's pretty timeless. I think Borderlands 3 looks good. And it's also one of those rare games, while technically still a little better on 360, the PS3 version is at least pretty good, and it's comparable enough, which is something to say, I suppose. Because there was also sometime, I can't remember exactly when it happened, but there was a point where Mass Effect 1 also got ported to the PS3.
Right.
Because remember, Mass Effect 2 came to the PS3 as well.
Right.
But 1 came a bit later, obviously, because it was initially published by Microsoft.
And was it?
And it ran really
only in
bad.
the trilogy.
Oh,
That was a trilogy pack, yeah.
Mass Effect 1 ran really bad?
Yeah, it did. It's
okay, because I was going to
PS3.
say, I might be confusing it with a few other examples, like Oblivion, I believe, is said to generally be a little better on PS3 than 360, just
Sure,
because it was released so much later, right? But
That's
I guess
not Unreal Engine, though.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm saying, like, I think I'm conflating it with a few other examples where the PS3 version came later and maybe had some improvements just because of the time difference and that they had more time to figure it out. But I guess, yeah, in my head, I thought, I thought I heard that the PS3 version of Mass Effect was okay, but I've not played very much of the PS3 version, so.
So Gears of War 3, then. This is the point I've mentioned multiple times now. It's kind of like a major change for the engine in terms of what it could do. This came out in 2011. So this was like almost 5 years after Gears of War 1. This is where things like Light Mass entered the picture. And there would still be some games released after this that kind of subscribe to the old look. Like Silent Hill Downpour comes out, looks not good, and it runs like absolute butt on everything. Total mess of a game. In Mass Effect 3, it's a nice looking game, but that runs super bad on PS3 as well. But then you had stuff like Arkham City, which took the concepts of the original and made it more of an open world, and it ran okay on all the consoles, which was remarkable for the time.
Yeah.
I guess it ran okay on PS3 and 360. It would later run less okay on the Wii U, with the armored edition.
Oh yes, we did play a bit of that, didn't we, John?
Yes, indeed. It's
Or at least
it's
I did.
special. But in the years that come, this is when I think like this is sort of like the golden era of Unreal Engine 3 because we got some really beautiful games to come out of this, I would say. Right on the edge of beautiful, I would say there's Spec Ops: The Line. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah, I mean, I almost bought it, I think, when we were out shopping at Vacuums and Video Games, but then I
Oh, yeah.
talked myself out of it. But
It's cool.
I mean, that game is, I didn't realize that was Unreal Engine, but
It is.
I mean, that one's really known for its progressive storyline, I think.
Exactly.
More so than the gameplay or graphics.
It's a nice looking game though. They do a good job representing the city. But then, of course, we also had Borderlands 2, which took the concepts of the original game and pushed it even further. I think Borderlands 2 is still a beautiful game. And on PC, it has physics, if I recall, which I also didn't mention. Mirror's Edge on the PC also had physics. Have you guys ever seen that? With all the cloth simulation?
I've not
Yeah,
played
yeah,
it
with,
with
like,
that,
the-
but I've seen it. Yeah.
Like the tarps and
Super
stuff.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. There
I
was
mean, I
also,
feel like that was kind of like the big showpiece for it at the time.
It was.
That was, like that. When they announced it, that was the game that they used. They showed it. with.
Exactly. Unreal Engine 3 also gave us a reboot of XCOM with Enemy Unknown, which I think was a
that's
phenomenal game.
Very good game, yes.
And it looked pretty all right for that.
Yeah.
But from early on, one of the games that stands out the most to me is like really holding up beautifully from a visual perspective. Dishonored from Arcane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another game where
This
they lean
game-
into the stylization.
Very much so. I forget his name now, but the late creator that worked on a lot of the architecture and design of Half-Life 2, I think Victor something was his name, who sadly passed away. He was the man behind Dunwall in the visuals of Dishonored.
Oh, wow.
And it really shows. Like, it's a really, really special game visually, still holds up, and it looks good on all the platforms. And that was indeed Unreal Engine 3.
What's Dishonored 2? Is that Unreal 4?
No, Dishonored 2 is their own custom engine derived from id Tech.
Like they had figured out the shortcomings at this point, and like, what were there features that were added like after this point that like made a big difference, you think, in development?
In 2011, we saw the most significant upgrades in terms of what Unreal Engine 3 was capable of. Not all games would utilize this, but this would pay dividends going forward. So I'm talking about the Samaritan. Do you remember the Samaritan demo?
So I remember it a little bit. Kind of fuzzy memory on it, though.
So this tech demo was truly mind-blowing at the time. It shows us a rainy cityscape at night with a very Deus Ex looking man lighting a cigarette and like essentially performing some crimes before taking on some dudes. It's very like kind of that noir feature, but it's all about focusing on the granularity. So this is the point where the engine switched over to essentially like DirectX 11 class rendering features. They added a lot more in terms of tessellation and displacement mapping. They added subsurface scattering to the mix, so better skin sort of simulation, image-based reflections, which were extremely important for like varying glossiness and HDR highlights across reflective surfaces, which is how you get all these like beautiful reflections and effects. They added bokeh depth of field, which was something that was just starting to become in vogue at the time. They added more physics and stuff to the mix. So you actually had like proper cloth simulations and other things like that in there. There was deferred rendering was added in with MSAA, allowing for both. You actually got better anti-aliasing, but you also got like lots of complex light sources. This was also the era where deferred rendering was becoming more popular, thanks to Killzone 2, actually, which was one of the first games to really do it.
Can you sort of explain deferred rendering? It's a term I hear a lot, but it's never solidified in my head.
So think about it like this. So try when you have a game and you need to render a light. That was actually a very expensive solution, right? To put it simply, what deferred rendering does is that it kind of like breaks up the rendering pass into a bunch of different buffers. They call it the G buffer, right? So you've got like depth, diffuse, color, and various other different layers that all combine together to create the final image. So the basic idea and the reason you would break it up into all these different layers is that it essentially you're rendering to like a texture, like a full screen quad almost, rather than having to do like a more complex per light calculation. So if you want a bunch of lights, the cost is actually more per pixel within that like screen space, right? As opposed to per light, where if you're actually calculating every single light individually as a light, it takes a lot more, many more passes and rendering. Whereas when you do with deferred rendering, and this is kind of coming off the top of my head here, you can essentially do it in like 2 passes or so. So it massively speeds up what's possible. So it's just a really cool way to get a bunch of lights and do other kind of similar effects.
So it's maybe kind of almost like in a more like modern tech sense, like the BVH structure for ray tracing, where it's like kind of simplifying what you are tracing against or simplifying what you are lighting so that you don't have to just do everything.
Right. It's like, so the reason it's called the G buffer, by the way, is that it's like the geometry pass, right? Where you're rendering all the different objects in the scene first, but you're not doing the final colors.
So it's just, it's compositing.
It's compositing. You're basically changing where you do the lighting calculations, and it allows it to be done in a way that's simply a lot faster than the more forward rendering pass. And we've seen things come and go where there's like hybrid forward deferred renderers, forward plus, different variations on this. They each have their own advantages and disadvantages, but deferred also, it can create performance bench bottlenecks in other areas that can be troublesome. So like it's not very fast on mobile devices because it's really heavy on memory bandwidth. So like that's why it would be a problem for like Switch, for instance, the original Switch, and like phones and such, which is actually, there is something to say about phones as well. But if we go back to the Samaritan demo, it's basically just, it's a whole bunch of new features and embracing technologies that would then kind of feed into where they would go with Unreal Engine 4, although UE4 would take it a lot further from there. And it set a visual target so high that most games couldn't realistically reach it, except for one. Well, maybe there's a couple others, but I actually want to talk about Batman Arkham Knight. So this,
right.
In my mind, Arkham Knight is the game, and maybe Injustice 2, which also has a really good look, but that's a more limited game as a fighter. But Batman Arkham Knight, you guys have played this, right?
I've only played a little bit, but I do think it's important to note we're talking about a new generation here. This is not a PS360 game at all.
That is a good point, Tri, because you're right. This is one that comes out on the PS4, so we're already a year out from the launch of PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. This is the next generation. And it finally realizes both some of the things from that original 2004 demo, but also the stuff that we saw in the Samaritan, and it kind of brings them to life. And I think this is probably, in my book, the best looking Unreal Engine 3 game that was ever made. And there's nothing else close to it. When you're
I
through
really got to
streets,
prioritize playing through it.
Dude, when you're going through full speed on the city streets, with all that motion blur, the rain, the effects, like everything playing off, like there's both the near and far field detail, the water rendering, the lighting, shadows, like it is insanely good looking. And you're right, it took next generation to get there. I do not believe Batman Arkham Knight could have been made on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360.
Although we have seen it running on hardware that is roughly that class, have we not, in the past year or two?
No, Try. You're talking about Switch, but the Switch, while limited in terms of power, has a far more modern GPU than PS3 360.
Right.
And that's the reason, right? Like,
but it doesn't work well.
It doesn't work well to begin with, but it also, so even though it's a more modern GPU that can technically run it, it still works really badly.
Yeah.
The PS360 would have been far worse.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. I just don't think you could have done it. And we saw what they could do with Batman on that class of hardware, and we saw the massive leap between Arkham City and Arkham Knight, which was just huge, I would say.
I would say that it's only kind of been more recent years where Batman Arkham Knight has kind of been celebrated for like, whoa, wait a second. It was doing all these cool things that we don't really see in games a lot, especially like some of that wave stuff in the, in the harbor and whatnot. Like, it's like, wow, this game looks a lot better than a lot of UE4 games. And I feel like that's only kind of been where its reputation has started to be rehabilitated after it initially launched to like not great reviews, which is one of the reasons I
don't get
passed
it.
on it.
I genuinely don't get it. I think it's an amazing game. People were way too harsh on the Batmobile stuff.
I mean, I was already
think it's
kind of
super
down
cool.
on Arkham City because I didn't like its more open approach. So
I'm definitely a fan of
Asylum,
Arkham Asylum more so than I am with Arkham City.
I can agree with that, but I would say I like Arkham Knight a lot more than Arkham City, actually.
Yeah, but it's just that for me,
What about Origins? Arkham Origins was
was the one
developer.
That was the one that I felt like that was also Unreal Engine, of course, and that was one that I felt it didn't really need to happen. It was good, but it didn't need to happen.
What about Blackgate that was on like 3DS?
That's Unreal Engine also, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, was there Unreal Engine on Vita and 3DS? I can't remember.
Yeah, because I mean that's on 360 also, and PS3.
That is true. So Unreal Engine, that's okay. So let's shift a little bit. I know it's a bit scattered, but this is a big topic. PS Vita is a mobile device, right? Unreal Engine 3 did come to mobile. I don't believe it did come to 3DS, however. I will just say that. The 3DS version of this game was very likely not Unreal Engine. But there were Unreal Engine games on this. And one example, of course, and even though it doesn't run well at all, Borderlands 2 came to the PS Vita. But actually, the Unreal Engine mobile stuff kind of starts with the release of Infinity Blade. Do you remember Infinity Blade?
Oh, yeah.
I remember it being a big deal at Apple's, whatever the newest iPhone that was coming out at the time, showing up at that press conference when they... their yearly iPhone conference.
So that would have been the iPhone 4.
Okay.
And this came out in 2010. So the iPhone 4 was the first iPhone with the quote-unquote Retina display. And I think it's one of the best looking iPhones, actually, just like aesthetically. It's a beautiful little device just to hold in your hands. Still is. Yeah, it's super nice. I love it. Yeah, and Infinity Blade was a huge deal as it really, really showed a level of visual fidelity that up to that point we just hadn't seen on a mobile device. Like it wasn't exactly on par with what we saw in 360, but it wasn't worlds away either. Right? It really started to look like what you could see on a game console running an Unreal Engine game of that day, but in a small format. And it was a really cool mobile-friendly game. It was kind of like I always kind of liken it to like a modern take on Karateka, where you're essentially moving through this world. You're engaging in these fairly simple one-on-one battles, and then you're moving to the next area. Right? It's basically like 3D Karateka. And they made at least 3 of them. I think Infinity Blade 3 came out like 3 years later. I don't think any of them are available anymore, though. I think that they all went away, which is a shame.
Yeah, so none of them got ported to the Vita, even?
No, I don't think they did. Okay, well, I was thinking of Vita-based Unreal Engine 3 games. Aside from the bad Borderlands port, we actually got Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
Which is super interesting because Mortal Kombat, the reboot, as well as like DC Universe versus Mortal Kombat and all that, those were among the very few games on consoles to run at 60 frames per second while utilizing the engine. They put a lot of effort into designing the visuals very specifically to hit that frame rate target, and they did it.
Such a good looking game too, Mortal Kombat.
And that's interesting because NetherRealm would stick with that engine up through Mortal Kombat 11 and Injustice 2.
A game that's on PS5.
A game that's on PS5, right?
And it looks great. It still looks great.
It looks incredible.
Beautiful. I genuinely believe that a lot of those very late era games, they just hold up really well. And the last chunk of Unreal Engine 5 or Unreal Engine 3's life was genuinely good. There's horror games like the Outlast titles. There was Outlast 2, which I think looked really good. XCOM got a sequel, XCOM 2, on that generation of consoles, which again, it kind of evolved that formula. Looked excellent, I would say.
Mighty Number 9.
Okay. So you mentioned that's one where I think maybe things didn't go so well.
Yeah.
Mighty Number 9 is not a great looking game. And boy,
so I
that Wii
put
U
Mighty Number
version,
9 and Two Human in their own little bin, I think.
yes.
So what about you were talking about all the new features added to the engine. I don't know if this was a UE3 engine feature or not, or if this was the developer implementing it on their own. But if I'm remembering correctly, wasn't Remember Me the first game to ship with physically based rendering materials?
Yep. And I believe that was 2013, and it actually shipped on PS360.
Right.
Making it a very special game visually. Where yes, they actually did do PBR materials and made it work.
What is PBR?
Physically based rendering. The idea where it's like you're basically capturing like the gloss and matte of materials, like the metalness, and it's like a flat way of creating materials for games that allows them to work correctly with the lighting to produce more realistic results. Before this, you would always have like quote unquote materials like that would be more influenced by like color and artists as opposed to making neutral, like realistic materials that then are influenced by everything else happening around it.
Right. Like the material properties itself don't actually include color with PBR, right?
Right. That's basically kind of it. So it's
all
realism
about
pretty well.
the information of how light should react to this material.
Correct. And Remember Me was basically the first to do it.
Not a wonderful looking game.
I would disagree. Honest. I think it's a nice looking game. If you should go back to it and look again.
I played it. I played it like, I don't know, 2-3 years ago. I mean, I feel like it still very much looks like a typical console UE3 game of the era, despite that technology being in it. I don't think it's immediately obvious.
I'm not sure I agree with that.
Maybe I'm just thinking so much about how bad the hair rendering looks.
It's not great.
I mean, it's still got those like that bad hair, that bad shadows, like that's what my eye is drawn to more than anything else.
What did you play it on?
I played it on Xbox 360. It's not backwards compatible.
It might be why then, I wonder, because I played it on PC where I feel like those problems were less obvious.
Yes. I forgot there was a PC version, to tell you
and the
truth.
quality of it stood out. It was a cut above anything at the time in terms of what Unreal Engine was doing. I would say it was a very, very good looking game.
I would imagine that the PC difference would be pretty stark there for sure.
Also, you mentioned earlier there was BioShock Infinite, which that was a very troubled development, and the game changed a lot, but that did ship on Unreal Engine 3, and I would say it was a pretty handsome game overall, with a very different look compared to the originals. Gosh, there's just so many things on here. But unfortunately, there's a bit of a legacy that I haven't mentioned yet, and it's PC. Despite Epic having been more of a PC company up through the creation of this engine and everything, Unreal Engine 3 is one that never really worked all that well on PC. And this is a generation where pretty much every Unreal Engine 3 game would ship with pretty serious stuttering issues. Like, this is before we had Alex Battaglia in the world raising awareness of stutter struggle. And yes, Unreal Engine 4 games also lots of problems with this, but UE3 is really where it started, and it was often bad. I specifically remember buying Gears of War for the PC back in the day and really being confused as to like these constant hitches and stutters during play. It felt like playing off of an old small mechanical hard drive where it's like grinding and like stopping all the time. It was really bad for that. And maybe not all, but a lot of PC games powered by UE3 basically exhibited these problems throughout the entire run of its existence. And of course, we were talking about the technical impressiveness of Arkham Knight, but when that first shipped on PC, it was so bad they actually had to stop selling it briefly.
Wow.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it was a complete mess. It was basically unplayable on most rigs at the time.
Why can they just not solve this?
I don't know. It's not clear where they went wrong or why it was such a problem.
And why three full engine versions later?
Yeah. I mean, it's improved, but it's just so one of the things though that Unreal Engine 3 added to the mix that hadn't existed previously really is the option to stream level data. And this is something that actually did extend it into most games, right? Up to this point, the first two Unreal Engines, they had only basically, it would load a map into memory. Maybe some assets would be loaded on the way, but it basically loaded into memory. You play the level, you reach a point, and then it loads the next map. And that's just how it worked. And then when Unreal Engine 3 came along, they started to actually stream in new chunks of the level as you played. And it would be able to do this without taking you out of the experience. I often wonder if this is also where some of the slow walking in Gears of War 1 came from at the time, where they slow you down intentionally so that they can load in the next section. Mass Effect had this with the elevators that people complained about, where it was loading the next section. In some cases, like Turok 2008, the PC version, actually, they couldn't do the streaming. So it actually they just inserted loading screens.
Was this the beginning of squeeze holes?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This is basically what that is. So that was another kind of long problem with Unreal Engine games throughout. And while we're on nitpicking, I also want to mention FMV, because this is a generation where I feel like everyone deprioritized FMV, but they still used video. And Unreal Engine games typically seem to use BINC codec as the codec of choice because it's very low on CPU requirements, but most Unreal Engine games shipped with video playback that I would describe as lackluster. Bad frame pacing, bad quality, lots of macro blocking. Everything it never felt smooth.
Still a problem to this day.
And it's still an issue. There were exceptions though, like Lost Odyssey, for instance, where remember that intro where they transitioned seamlessly from FMV to real time?
Goodness.
Blink and you miss it. It's so seamless and this playback is so smooth. So we know it's possible, but most games didn't do it.
That's mainly a thing with Unreal Engine games, right? Because I mean, there's lots of other FMVs that look great. I always think of Final Fantasy 13 has fantastic looking FMVs on PS3. When you have that storage.
I feel like most developers outside of Square Enix, though, don't prioritize smooth frame pacing for FMV these days. But that's an issue with all engines basically now. Video playback quality has just been so deprioritized, and I also feel like having to also target Switch and the limited storage size that you might have for cartridges. Has caused the quality of FMV to not be very high because they don't want to juggle multiple versions for Switch versus the other consoles, and they don't want their file install sizes to be huge for the other consoles either. So encodes aren't good, frame pacing is bad. This is kind of where the priority on making FMV look good just went down, and it's become a lost art, very sadly.
But at the same time, there are positive things to Unreal. And I think we should start kind of winding down by talking about some of those positive elements. And I would say that Unreal Engine 3 really did open the floodgates for developers to sort of work together as a large community. There's this pool of shared knowledge that would develop along with Unreal Engine 3, right? The tools were somewhat standardized. Sure, you could do custom stuff with it, but there was so much discussion happening. This is when the internet was really taking off. People were communicating online. Epic's documentation was really pretty good. There was just a lot happening that made figuring out very complex graphics for the time a bit easier to handle. And I feel like that played a big role in a lot of games getting made in a timely fashion. And it's really important to this day. Like, we do complain about stuff like some of Unreal's problems for sure, but I do think it is actually a very important tool for the industry that a lot of developers rely on successfully.
I think back in the 32-bit and 64-bit days, most developers could have like a staff member or several staff members that were capable of that kind of engineering. But as these systems became increasingly complex, as games more and more required multi-platform releases to be successful, I think you're reducing the pool of people who are interested and capable of making that kind of engine technology and keeping pace with the hardware, and all those requirements is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. So I think it's a whether you want to call it a necessary evil or not an evil at all, like that kind of licensed engine technology, I think just kind of became necessary to keep up with the growing complexity of games.
And, Epic, they did a lot good during this era as well, I would say. It's like both for themselves and just for the overall community. And I think the results speak for themselves. Like, again, there are things to complain about with Unreal Engine 3, but when you look at this overall list of games, and we've only touched on like a portion of them, there's a lot of really good games that were made with Unreal Engine 3.
I mean, some all-time classics, without a doubt.
It's really wild. Like, it really was, it was the centerpiece that powered that generation.
Yeah. And even just looking at this list of games and some of the later ones that came out, like they were next gen on PS4 and Xbox One. I mean, some of these, they're just like doing such interesting things with the engine. Like, the one that sticks out to me is the Guilty Gear games, where they made where they're able to have that cell shaded look, and then, when you execute certain moves, it will go into 3D and like the camera will spin around and do all this crazy stuff. But it's the animations are keyframed in a way that makes them look like 2D animation.
They don't interpolate between frames. That's the key.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing, right? And that they got Guilty Gear Xrd running at 60 FPS on a PS3 even, with visuals looking like that. Like, that is awesome. So, I mean, when you just look at the sheer volume of platforms that Unreal Engine games shipped on and the types of games that it allowed to be made, like, just a lot of flexibility here that no other engine up to that point really had to offer, right? Like, there were strategy games, racing games, fighting games, first-person shooters, action adventures, board games, like weird, like Kinect stuff, like just about anything you can imagine could be made in this engine. And I think that was super, super important. Like, up until this point, like Quake engine, not really. You didn't see much stuff like that. Even the earlier Unreal Engines, not so much. Renderware was huge during the PS2 Xbox era, and that's probably the closest we could get to this comparison, where renderware did indeed allow for a huge, wide variety of games to be created, but it definitely wasn't pushing cutting edge visuals outside of what Criterion itself was doing. They seemed to have some kind of secret sauce.
It was only kind of near the end of the PS3 360 generation that I think Unity started coming to consoles. If I'm not mistaken, I what's the name of the game? There's a downloadable like PSN game where you play as it's like a 2D sort of physics based platformer that I think is actually really good. You play as this like
Quantum Conundrum.
No. You play as this like blue collar guy on like this like space mining station.
Richard.
What's it called? Richard, yeah, I think that game's really good. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's the first console Unity game, and it's a later PS3, later years. Certainly, I don't remember what year exactly.
No, that would have been 2011. So
it's getting toward the end of PS3.
Yeah. So obviously Unity would become pretty big in console space for the PS4 generation with mixed success, I would say. But it kind of definitely worked alongside Unreal during that generation. But during this, you're right. We really didn't see a lot of Unity stuff on consoles during that era. It was more, it was a very different thing up until that point. Whereas Unreal Engine 3 was already on its third generation engine when the 360 was launched. That it just like took off.
I mean, I think it's easy to kind of laugh at it and poke fun at it, but as we've got on this conversation, it's honestly just made me want to play these games,
Exactly. That's what I've been thinking about. It's like, oh, I can't wait to capture some footage for this and revisit some of these games and, maybe play some of these for the first time. I mean, I won't obviously be able to do it with all of them, but I mean, there's just, it's easy to forget just how many good games that came out with this engine that don't look like the typical Unreal and don't have that typical beefy dude look.
Yes, exactly. That's the thing I think we realized today, right, Coury? Like that look that we talked about at the beginning of the show, the beefy dude, like super contrasty, high specular highlight kind of look of Unreal Engine, it only really applied for like the first half of its lifespan. And even then there were exceptions all the way along its journey. And by the end, I think it resulted in some pretty awesome stuff. And I would argue that during the early days of the PS360 generation, it was probably producing more compelling results than Unreal Engine 4. It took UE4 a little bit to get off the ground, I would say. It's an engine with issues, and those issues can be annoying. But when you step back and appreciate all it's done for us, and the amount of games that it allowed developers to build, I really can't talk that negatively about it.
Right.
I think I think it was a very important thing, and Epic did really good work during this generation. They may not have solved everything. There's definitely, the PS3 issues were annoying, PC stuttering, definitely a problem. And the fact that it was, it was all about 30 FPS on consoles. But then again, most things were during this era. That's just where we were at the time. They were trying to go beyond what the consoles were really able to do at these resolutions. But it was important.
Anything that can do that hair in Alice Madness Returns is okay in my book.
I forgot we didn't mention it earlier, but you briefly mentioned DMC Devil May Cry, which was one of those weird cases where, and this is from Ninja Theory, right? They did Heavenly Sword and then Enslaved. DMC runs okay at 30 FPS for an Unreal Engine game. It actually runs really well, but that was a game that was built on 60 FPS. And in fact, MT Framework DMC4 was 60 FPS. So this felt like a pretty big step down at the time. But, I really think looking back, like that was not, that's not its main legacy.
It runs at 60 FPS on next gen.
It did eventually come to those machines as well. And you're right, 60 FPS there, which is cool.
But we did get a lot of games. There were several games like that, I believe, that actually ran quite nicely on PS4 and Xbox One. Whereas, 30 FPS kind of did largely remain the target that generation. But some of those Unreal Engine 3 ports were running a lot nicer on that hardware.
I think that's going to do it for this episode. It was a very chaotic one in the end. There's just so much to kind of dance through.
No, I think.
But I
think it was actually pretty structured and straightforward. It went more smoothly than I imagined, and now I'm kind of like, man, maybe I should go play Arkham Knight or something.
Yeah. You know what? From this modern perspective, if you still want some gosh darn good visuals that take that wet metal look to the top, they take it as far as it can go, baby. Go play Arkham Knight, because it's a freaking great looking game. And it's fun. And now the PC version runs great, by the way. So
there you go.
You can enjoy it at a nice high frame rate. Ooh. But that's going to do it for this episode. So aside from Arkham Knight, what other Unreal Engine 3 games are you guys eager to play?
Oh man, we've talked about so many that it's kind of gone in and out of my head. I've never played all the way through Mirror's Edge. And Alice Madness Returns. That's a game that I've tested out many times. And man, I'm kind of itching to play through that now.
I keep thinking about loading up Lost Odyssey again because I never really gave it a playthrough on Xbox Series consoles, and it does run so much better there. And I feel like I picked up the Japanese version of that actually, which comes in a really beautiful case. I might drop that one in and give that a whirl, since luckily, even though those games were originally region locked, they're not region locked on Series X with backwards compatibility.
Also talking about games that were ported to more recent consoles and have, or not so much ported, but have better performance on the current consoles through backwards compatibility. The Last Remnant is one of those interesting games where the version that was brought to Switch actually just ran at 1080p in handheld mode for, even though obviously the handheld screen couldn't handle it. But now if you play that on Switch 2, it actually runs really smoothly and is 1080p on the screen. And that's been something that's been on my mind as maybe a game to prioritize as a sort of travel game, just because, I don't know, it just seems really interesting to me.
Actually, I played one recently. I played through Singularity recently, which was one of Raven's last original games. It's kind of their take on the BioShock formula in a way. I definitely recommend playing it, and it's quite good on the PC once you mod it out a little bit. You can get some SG SSAA in there, ultra-wide support, looks gorgeous.
I keep meaning to look for an Xbox 360 copy of Wolverine X-Men Origins, because I keep hearing really good things about it, actually.
Another one, did you guys play Bulletstorm? I love Bulletstorm.
Oh, yeah.
I'm familiar with it. I think I played it.
That's another beefy dude.
It's super beefy, but it's tongue in cheek, right?
It is parodying the beefy dudes, basically.
Right.
Yes.
And the action is wild. There's some funny stuff in there. I had a great time with that.
Wasn't there a VR port of that was considered pretty bad?
Yeah, it was horrible.
I wonder if that was Unreal Engine or not, or Unreal 3 or not.
It probably was. But actually, maybe they ported it to Unity or something. I don't know. But there is a PS4 and Xbox One version, which is cool.
That's good?
You get 60 FPS and everything on the consoles.
The full clip edition or something.
Which you did not get on the original. It was 30. And missing screen space crepuscular rays on the PS3 version even, which was a shame. Man, we could talk about this. There's so many freaking games here, but we should start to wrap it up. So, thanks to everyone that made it this far. I appreciate your support on the show. Thank you to you guys for joining me as well. It's been a lot of fun so far getting up through episode 7, and we have a lot more coming up here. And I think the next episode, the prodigal son will return. Audie will be back. So look forward to that if you've been pining for some Audie, and maybe he'll even bring a little bit of news with him, since I know some of you still want some news snippets in there. So we can fire in some news there. We just need the right guy to do it,
Yeah, slide it in there.
Slide it in. Exactly. Oh, man. But yes, that's going to do it for this episode. So thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll see you next time.